Hey, what's up, guys? You were listening to your Mental Matters podcast. I'm your girl, Mo. And for those of you watching, thank you for tuning in. We are back with another episode and a very special guest, Lauren. We have Lauren in the building.
I feel like you're the special guest. I'm like just happy to be here.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming.
Of course.
I of course want to give like the audience a little bit of the backstory of how like we came to meet officially, because I think we met virtually first because I reached out via social media, I would say, or no, I reached out via email, but I found you on social media, right? I came across your content on TikTok because you were all over TikTok and just doing great content creation, which I want to talk about too, like as a therapist navigating being a content creator, which I think is like just important to talk about.
Totally.
But from there, we connected via email, and then you had a therapist link up event, which we were able to meet in person.
That was so fun.
And it was a great time. I met a friend there, MJ, shout out
MJ is one of the therapists on my team, and she was like, I found my friend for the night, so I'm good. And you two were just chatting it up. I was like, perfect.
Yes. Hi, MJ. And it was a great event. I think it was just refreshing for me to meet new like therapists in the field, because I have some friends that are therapists, but just meeting new therapists in New York who like are passionate about the work and want to connect with other therapists, it just felt good to be in that space. So I appreciate you for just all the work that you do and bringing people together in that way. And then, of course, for being on the show.
Of course. Well, thank you for coming. I remember when I got your email, I think I was on vacation.
Yes.
And it was like late at night because I can't ever turn off my email, apparently. And I'm like scrolling through, and then I looked you up and I was like, immediate follow, immediate yes. Happy to come and do it whenever. But now, of course, it's June. And that's the way the scheduling crumbles. But it was so nice to meet you in person first. So then I was like less nervous, I think.
Absolutely. And here we are.
And here we are.
Yes.
Caught up.
Yes. And it's actually a heat wave right now. So it's I'm sweating, but it's good sweat because I feel like this conversation is going to be a good one. I just want to start off with, introducing you, like who, having you introduce yourself, I should say, like who is Lauren? Where are you from? What made you become a therapist? Like what led you to where you are right now?
Yeah, so I'm a career changer. I grew up in Connecticut, wanted to do something in music, obsessed with Taylor Swift. If anyone follows me on TikTok, they have gathered that by now. Like wanted to do like singing or performing or something of that nature. Got to Nashville for school. Was like, oh no, everyone's so good. Like there's no way. Which I'm sad about because I was struggling. I always struggled with my mental health when I was younger. Struggled with an eating disorder. My mom had an eating disorder too. Not like actively when I was growing up, but there was, when we look at where the apple falls and all of our familial stuff that makes us like where we're at. I struggled with that so much throughout my teen years, throughout my relationships in those years, and then getting to college in Nashville, Tennessee, which wasn't Nashville today. It was like, why are you going there? Like, what is there at the time? But I really wanted to like get out and do something different and do something in the music industry or entertainment something. And then I was like, I'll do like an adjacent to the performer role. I worked in media for a few years. I moved to New York after college. That was when my eating disorder became really bad. I mean, it was never good, but like really prevalent to the point where, how as therapists we look at social, occupational, relational.
Yes.
All three were struggling. Everybody knew I was suffering. And I wasn't really like talking openly about it. I think for so long, like when I look back at college even or high school, we didn't have a lot of language that was openly spoken about when it comes to eating disorder behaviors, self-harming behaviors, like any of that stuff. So I was just doing these actions, not understanding what was going on internally, knowing I wasn't okay, but also not being able to articulate it to anyone.
Yes.
So that was like coming to a head when I moved to New York. I was actually working for a media maker / venture capital fund that invested in women, like all these things that I was like really passionate about. So like I'm telling this long version of the story because it's like entertainment, it's like entrepreneurship, it's like all these things that kind of came together to where I am now.
Yes.
And the eating disorder is a big piece of it because I hit a breaking point. and needed to change my life. And I think getting treatment was actually like a cry for help and also a way out and a way of like resetting my life in a way. I was so lucky. I was still on my mom's insurance. My mom works for a big university. Well, she's retired now, but so I had the ability to go to a treatment center, and I was very, very lucky. And I feel like a lot of communities don't have that access. So I just wanted to say that because like I want to acknowledge that that I was able to do this, that I was able to get a subletter, that I was able to move back in with my parents. Like so many people don't have access to get that kind of care, but I was very lucky and able to do that. And then I came back and I was like, what the fuck do I want to do with my life? Like, I can't like go back to what I was doing. I don't think like, I think that would continue to make me sick. Yeah. And like even certain places and people and like routines that I was like, I just see myself falling back into that. I think I need to start completely over. I didn't start completely over because I was a nanny my whole life. And so I got a nannying job. I'm like, okay, I know how to keep myself afloat. I'll do that and I'll figure out what I want to do. And I was like, do I like do creative writing? I started writing poetry a lot when I was in treatment. That's actually where LEL comes from. I did like a poetry account for a while. It was LEL Poetry. And then so when I created my company, I was like LEL Therapy in case I ever want to go back to poetry. I'll just keep everything the same.
Absolutely.
I do not think I want to go back to poetry. But I was like, maybe I could turn my story into something meaningful and help other people somehow. Maybe I'll tell my story through writing or media or something. And then I kept going back to like the therapy space and my PHP program. And one time somebody thought I was one of the therapists because I had just like gotten the hang of things so well that at a certain point I'm like taking people under my wing and stuff. So I kept going back to that one moment. I decided to apply to NYU. It was the only school I applied to. If I have like a one-track mind about something, I'm like, I'm going to do it. And I don't give myself a lot of options. I got in, I started the accelerated program, and kind of the rest is history. Like I knew I wanted to do like eating disorder work in a private practice setting so that I could be an entrepreneur, but also like not go back into a hospital. Cause I was like, I think that, or not hospital, but like hospitalization kind of setting. So I was like, I think that's a little too triggering for me. I don't know if I want to be on the other side of that. Cause I know how like sort of traumatizing those spaces actually are. And like, we can talk about, I mean, I could talk about that all day long, but like I built this thing that's now LEL Therapy, which is my company, my name, my TikTok, my everything, like it's all like under the same umbrella. And my goal still today is just to like help people feel positively about themselves and like be sort of a lighter voice in this space. I thought a lot about like, what do I want to present myself as? And like, I really tried to take a non-serious approach to mental health, I think, as you have gathered, and try to just like make people smile and make people like feel seen and heard if I can through either individual work or the work with the therapist that I've now hired or TikTok and Instagram. And now I've kind of been showing a little bit more of my personality on there and trying to just be like me. And that's been really fun. So that's the long story long.
No, I love it. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think, absolutely, I think your approach, that's what caught me. Like when I saw your content on TikTok, I was like, oh, I love this because it's personable. Like people want to, at least for me, I was like, oh, I want to watch more of your like clips just to see like what else you're like sharing, because there was gems in there and like nuggets, but it was also like kind of funny at the same time, like because I think it was your personality coming out, really.
Thank you.
Because I think that's what translates the most, at least that I've learned with like social media and stuff, is like just being yourself and like being like doing what comes naturally to you versus like trying to like fit into some sort of, even like, because I know they talk about the algorithm and stuff, but like just like not following that to a T, even just doing you.
No, if you try to get the algorithm to do what you want it to do, it's going to do the opposite every single time. So, and I also think people who are trying to be therapists now on on TikTok or Instagram, I always say, like, if it is going to be painful for you to set up that camera and it's going to take you 4 hours to get a 1-minute video, that's not for you. You have to find ways where it feels fun. Like one time I was, I know I said offline, I was like, oh, I like always have a million projects and like I can't ever say no. Talking to my individual therapist about this, and she's like, well, why don't you just like take a pause from the videos? I'm like, no, parent, the videos are what I want to do. Like, what are you talking about? Like, the videos feel really fun for me. So whenever I feel like you're trying to mold yourself into a space where you feel like you have to do something, it's going to come across inauthentic in a way.
For sure. Absolutely. And so, I love all of what you're doing. And I also wanted to just acknowledge like your journey with like the eating disorder and being able to just get better. I think that's a beautiful thing that like you had the support and you were able to get better, because I don't think, and that's a part of the reason why I wanted to have you on the show, because I saw, some of your content or videos about it and you just kind of like being in recovery. I know like you use that term a lot. And I was like, when I first saw it, I was like, in recovery from what?
I know, because you can't say eating disorder on TikTok, so you won't be able to use this as a clip. But you say ED, or you have to like use all these weird like character thingies to space it out.
Okay.
They block you. So even if you're a mental health professional, I feel like they need to find a better filtration system, because I still see all these diet culture-y people getting millions of views. And if I even say, so I usually just say recovery, ongoing recovery. I also like to like set the expectation that just because I am better now doesn't mean I won't struggle in the future. I mentioned fertility stuff before. That was a moment where I was like, oh, am I better? No, I was. But at the same time, I had a little bit more of a struggle with like some of the body image stuff that came up during that time when I did freeze my eggs. So I like to kind of share the things that are working for me and the journey that I've had, in hopes that it creates hope. But then I also like to like be real and be like, listen, this is a hard thing. That's why I believe in psychodynamic long-term therapy, because I do believe that like you need maintenance, you need support, you need somebody who knows your journey and can help you tune it up when you need. And that's what my therapist does for me. Now I was so lucky. Can I tell you? I stole her basically, because she was stepping down and out of the day program, and she's a New York licensed therapist. And when I was like, I'm going back to New York, I don't want to start with a new therapist, she's like, call me.
That's amazing.
So she was literally my therapist in treatment, and she knows me so well, can always crack me if I'm like trying to suss out something and like bring up stuff that she knows about me from the past. And then it's like, oh, that nugget from that past relationship or that thing with your mom or whatever else, like that's what's coming up here. So like I don't know if I'm never going to struggle again. I don't think I'll ever struggle to the extent that I was struggling again, because I'm so like deeply rooted in recovery now. My brain doesn't work the same that it used to. Like, I seriously don't think this is the same brain, because sometimes like stuff will come up around food and I'm like, that's so wild that I used to think that. That doesn't feel like me.
Absolutely. No, thank you for sharing. And I guess I'm curious, are you comfortable with sharing what it was that you were struggling with?
Oh yeah, all of the things.
Okay.
I had very classic like symptom swapping that you see with a lot of eating disorders. Because I struggled for so long, I feel like I tried literally every trick in the book. And that's something that I feel like people don't talk about enough too, is I'm not big on diagnosis. I'm kind of you're a whole person and you're exhibiting certain behaviors. And if a diagnosis is very important to you, I might read out some criteria to give you an idea that this is a thing that exists in the world. This is a thing that has a name, because sometimes people don't know that. But do I care if you're X or Y in the system? No.
Okay.
And I also just got diagnostic privilege, so I'm not like doing anything crazy with it. But like, I really don't think that it's as important as the pain and the emotional experience and dysregulation that is causing the symptoms a lot of the time. And I feel like so many diagnoses come back to trauma, or come back to some experiences that you've had, complex trauma, multiple different experiences that have shaped you and shaped your narrative around yourself and others in the world. And I'm kind of like, okay, that symptom but what's underneath it?
Mm-hmm.
Tell me more. Like
Yes.
we can work on fixing it. We can work on changing it. We can work on all the things that I think people come to therapy and they're like, give me tools, give me all the tools so I feel better. And I totally get it. But I'm more so focused on like, where did this come from? Like what's underneath all of it? And what are you trying to emotionally express through whatever symptoms coming up? Does that make sense?
That does. It does.
I figured it would for you.
Yeah. Yes.
I hope it makes sense for the audience out there.
Please. I hope you guys are listening. You know, it's very informative. It's informative for me. And this is something that I actually am interested in getting a specialty in or a certification in eating disorders.
Yeah.
I've been talking about it I've talked about it with my supervisors, but I've also talked about it with like even friends that like, you know, because my friends are always like, okay, well, what would be your focus? Like, you know, and I'm always like, I'm really interested in eating disorders, you know? And I think one of the reasons is I've had a lot of clients come to me at the practice that I work for, and they've had eating disorders, but, you know, my supervisor was like, oh, you have to like refer them to someone else because I don't have the certification. And so I was like, man, like it made me, like I was so curious, like what that would have been like to build that connection with them and help them through that journey. So I'm just like, you know what? That's my plan for the near future is to, you know, get that certification. And I also think that in, you know, communities of color, eating disorders is something that is rarely talked about. Like, I think like, you know, and there are so many people that I think may have eating disordered behavior. Maybe it's, you know, not like, you know, classic, you know, based on like the diagnostic criteria, eating disorder to the T, but there's just a lot of things that I feel like go undiagnosed in, you know, Black and brown communities. So I also think like this conversation just happening more, you know, and me using my platform to kind of bring attention to it. It was very intentional, like in that way to just like, we can talk about it. Like it's, you know, it doesn't have to be something that we're tight-lipped about. But I think, you know, for some reason, I do think also like the relationship with food and like, you know, people of color is interesting because I think, you know, we use food for many things, right? But I don't know that people actually understand like food is like, you know, we need it for like survival, right? We need it to like live and breathe and be healthy. You know, it's not always, you know, for, you know, celebration, but it's also not for to be abused or to be used, you know, in a way that isn't what it's used for, what the purpose of food is for too. So I think just like more education around food in communities of color is necessary too. So I think like just having you on and like your expertise, but also your personal experience, I think is really important.
Oh my gosh, no, and I absolutely would love it if you got certified and could continue speaking about this. I might be wrong with the statistic, but I'm pretty sure that the most underrepresented community in the eating disorder community or like undercared for community is Black women.
Yeah.
I will have to look it up again after just to double check on our facts, but like pretty positive that that's the case. And also when you're working with eating disorders, thinking about the cultural community that and like what's the word I'm trying to say? The cultural like implications of food and how food is used and how food and community go hand in hand. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Are so important to think about. And I think if you're underinformed about that and you start working with a client and you're not familiar with their cultural like relationship with food or certain foods, fasting rituals that are like in certain religious communities, like things like that could either be like overreacted to and called a disordered behavior when they're really not.
Yeah.
Or fly under the radar because maybe a clinician's too afraid to ask to look like they aren't informed or that they should know and they're embarrassed and they like don't want to ask an offensive question or something like that. But I think it's so important and like especially with the multicultural like competency, just saying like, I'm white. I don't understand what you know your lived experience is. Would you mind sharing a little bit more with me about that? Would that be okay with you so that I can understand a little bit more about your relationship with food? And you could share with me what things were like at your dinner table growing up and just kind of addressing it in the room. And I think having more Black and brown therapists is like the best way to bridge that gap because then people want to go to somebody who has had their lived experience. And I think that's really helpful.
Yeah.
I am unfortunately white and thin privileged, and that's a really hard thing like in this space too, because I absolutely want to advocate, and then I'm like, I'm the stereotype. Like it's like easy to say coming from me, but I do think continuing to talk about it in all spaces is helpful, I hope.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. Absolutely, I agree. Right, which is why we're here.
So we'll keep going.
Yes. Okay, so I have so many questions for you, so we'll get into it. So the first question that I have here is what is the difference between disordered eating and an eating disorder? Because I'm sure like people probably use it interchangeably sometimes, but from what I know, or at least what I think I know, there is a difference between like eating an ED, right?
Versus, an ED, right. So we can use the clips.
Right, exactly. ED versus disordered eating. So I wanted to just start there.
Okay, so this is where criteria is helpful because there's things that we can kind of point to. Mm-hmm. The things we don't want to point to are BMI. Let's throw that away. Mm-hmm. Let's get rid of this because that is not an accurate marker for whether you have an eating disorder or not.
Right.
I think when we look at an eating disorder versus disordered eating, I could probably argue maybe everyone has had some sort of disordered messaging when it comes to food. I think there's very few people in the world that have a healthy relationship with food most of their life because we're so bombarded with diet culture and ways to change yourself and fix yourself and be different and better. And I think most people associate that with changing or, manipulating your body or food in some way.
Yes.
So that's my big argument. I think I said this on another podcast recently. I'm like, show me all the people with a healthy relationship with food because I feel like there's probably some disordered eating tendencies in everyone at some point. If they've decided to go on a diet or if they've, been impacted by food and diet talk in some way. And then an eating disorder, I would say, is when it's affecting someone's social, occupational, or relational functioning.
Got it.
I feel like if it tips over into that space is where it would be considered, in my mind, an eating disorder versus we could work on disordered eating in therapy all day long. Like we're still going to work with it. It's just like looking at intensity and severity.
Yes.
So I would say like if you're thinking about food all the time, if you're thinking about your body all the time, if there's not a lot of brain space for anything else that is substantive to you, if you're not engaging in things that are living by your values, that's where we would want to look at this silly, strange relationship you got going on with food might be impacting you emotionally, relationally, socially, occupationally. And that's, I think, the first sign someone might say, you're right. Like, I'm having so much anxiety about this. I'm not going to my friend's birthday party. I'm having so much anxiety about this. I'm having a hard time focusing on work. I'm waking up at 5 a.m. and doing 3 workouts in a day.
Yes.
Just to burn off a regular piece of pizza. Right? Like, so we have those types of things to notice. And I think most people don't have the barometer.
Yes.
So with a therapist or even with educational content like this, like someone hearing, oh, that person's describing themselves in recovery and they're doing some things that I do, or they're talking about doing some things that I've done in the past when it comes to body checking or eating or exercising or whatever else, then it's like a light can go off a little bit when you don't have any language or you haven't been informed by anybody in your life that it's disordered.
Right. Understood. And I think that makes a lot of sense. That's so good. I think that's good. That's a gem right there. So like, I'm not even going to add anything else to that. But yeah, I think it's good. Just the breakdown of like the severity and like how it's impacting your life. And looking at that, like the differences between the two makes a lot of sense to me. And hopefully it's helpful to the listener, to the audience.
And not to knock your supervisor by any means, but I would say I do worry that there are so many clinicians out there that are so afraid to work with eating disorders that a lot of people don't get care at all. And depending on the intensity and severity, I do think some care can be better than no care.
Yeah.
Just to have that consistent space, that consistent voice. Because we think about all these sort of addictive behaviors, like numbing behaviors, like how long does it take somebody to really look at their relationship with food, or how long does it really take someone to really look at their relationship with alcohol, or things like that that are impacting their life? Sometimes it's really a long time. It's a long journey. It's a hard road.
Yeah.
And I worry about so many people that get like turned away because they might already have a narrative of I'm broken. There's something wrong with me. Nobody wants to help me or whatever. And then we, as the therapy space, we have such a tricky job in that arena because it's like, of course, there's not a part of me that wants to take on a ton of liability when it comes to somebody who could potentially harm themselves or their behaviors could harm them. Like I don't want to be responsible for that as a business owner.
Right.
But at the same time, I just want everyone to get some care if it'll help them shift and change their relationship with food. So it's so hard. It's like such a difficult thing that I feel like we don't talk about enough as clinicians.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thank you for that. And I actually have felt the same way where I wish I would have gotten the opportunity and chance because in my head, it's like, well, how else would I grow in this arena if I'm not getting that experience? One, and then of course, the client, they want care, they want the help. So it has been like difficult for me at times because I think it's just, I think maybe my supervisor might just be looking at it like, oh, this may be a liability, right? But, I look at it differently. And it's hard because it's like, the supervision period is also like temporary. So I'm just like, okay, I just have to like deal with this for now. But I think, it's been hard. Like I know not to like get into too much detail, but I had a client recently, like we saw each other, like she was referred to me. And we actually started seeing each other before I actually knew, because the way that things happen sometimes at the practice is things happen really quick. Like maybe she came from, I think she was actually a transfer client. She came from a previous therapist who had to leave the practice like suddenly. And then she was referred to me and then she was great. Like she was like, so sweet. And then we started talking and she had some disordered eating. So it wasn't like a full blown, there wasn't a, diagnosis just yet, but based on the symptoms and, my supervisor, shout out to her, she wanted me to get just like full detail, right, of all of the symptoms that she's been experiencing. Also like, her weight, right, what her eating habits were like, and things of that nature. And after me gathering all of that information and sharing it with my supervisor, she was just like, yeah, I think that, and I was just like, I would have been okay with continuing because I already felt like there was just some comfortability there that she was like ready to, work on it. But, maybe she saw something that like I wouldn't have been able to see just yet. That's why I'm always like, I know I don't know everything. I know I'm still learning and growing in this field and in the practice. So I'm like, she has, worlds of experience. So I'm like, maybe she just sees something that I don't. But, I think she got maybe more like alarmed, if anything. It just seemed like there was like, she was nervous. And so she thought that was best.
Totally. And I think that that's totally fair. And everyone should only work with populations that they feel super comfortable. And at a practice, my biggest thing is I do not like to criticize other therapists. I think that there's
it's
enough.
Necessary sometimes, though.
For sure. But at least publicly.
Yes.
At least publicly, because I think we're mostly doing our best. And everyone has different comfortability levels for sure. But one thing I think we all know that the relationship is the most important piece in
absolutely
whether or not a client's going to move forward with progress, whatever that means. By their own definition of progress and, just feeling better. So I think it can be easier once the relationship is formed than to say, we got to get a dietitian in here. We do.
Yes.
We got to get you to a higher level of care. Like, once a week isn't enough. And like saying that in a way where it's like, you got to work with me here, girl, like, or boy, or whoever they, like everybody, because everyone, boys struggle with eating disorders a lot. I actually like have worked with a lot of men. I go to women a lot because that's my primary audience, but I absolutely want to mention the men here too. Saying, what we got to do. And when the relationship is there and when they don't feel like you're criticizing, punishing, abandoning, pushing them away, then they're like, all right, you're right. Like I do need more support. And it comes in that like loving kind of like relationship place versus like continuing to feel like, oh, I got to go find another therapist because I've been fired by mine. I see that on TikTok all the time. People being fired by their therapist. When they use that language, I'm like,
Yeah.
Break my heart.
Yeah. I'm like, it's just, I could imagine it's discouraging for sure. That's why I always feel a little bit bad having to do it.
Yeah. But again, this is not on you. Like, and I feel like when you have a certification or when you have more experience, you'll feel like, no, I can do this. Like, and can fight for that a little bit more. Absolutely. And then decide, you know, whatever your next steps may be, what populations you want to work with best. And like, it's so fun actually being in that stage too, because you do get to try different things and work with so many different people and then be like, I think this is my niche.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm excited. I'm excited. And I'll be reaching out to say, Lauren,
I can't wait.
Guess what?
I can't wait.
Okay. All right. So thank you for that. So another question I have for you is, what is body neutrality? I saw that on, you know, just doing my research, browsing through.
Yeah.
You talked about that a little bit and I wanted to, you know, just expound further here.
Totally. Body neutrality is like this really hard concept because we're mostly taught to hate our bodies. I like to think about the journey in eating disorder treatment, or the journey in body image work, I would say, is slow and steady and small increments of mental shifts around how we speak to and think about ourselves and our body. And I'm always like, hey, I'm not going to ask you to go from I hate my body and I've hated my body since I knew what a body was to 6 months in therapy with me of, oh, I love myself.
Yeah.
Like what? I would never expect somebody to be able to make that shift.
Yeah.
And I don't care how many worksheets you do, you're not going to have that permeate. I want us to catch it and maybe shift it to something like, my body can do amazing things for me. I'm so grateful to have a body. You know, this isn't my favorite outfit, but I feel okay enough to get out the door. Like, it's language that's like, I don't want you to push it. I just want you to see if you can feel a little more appreciative or grateful for or fine toward your body.
Yes.
Doesn't have to be good. Could just be right there in the middle, that baby step toward maybe liking yourself a little bit more and not having thoughts about your body is a good thing. Like sometimes when you struggle with that self-hatred and then it's like, well, what's underneath this? Who really taught you?
Yeah.
Because babies don't run around hating their bodies.
Right.
It came from somewhere.
Yes.
And it probably came from a lot of different places. So then when we're consciously like working on this surface level of let's just shift our mindset to something different, do something different than what you've been doing every single day and hoping that it's shifting towards just a neutral, I have no thoughts about my body today. My body's fine. It's okay. It exists and I'm grateful for it. Something like that. Then underneath that, we're going to be doing that deeper psychological work of like, where the hell did this come from?
Yeah.
Let's find all the relational moments or societal narratives or internal dialogues that you are familial modeling that you've learned all this from.
Yeah.
Because there's got to be some adaptation here. You hating your body could be just an example. You think other people are going to reject it, so you reject it first. And you're doing that every day, but then you're trying to go on dates and you're presenting a person who does not like themselves. So that's that self-fulfilling prophecy, right? So it's kind of, I always say therapy, I'm getting off topic, sorry.
No, you're fine.
I always say therapy is like oscillating between the present issue that's really plaguing you and helping you make that a little bit more just like manageable while we're then like excavating and like going back and forth between the present and the past because we're not going to really be able to do any damage over here in a good way to like really deepen the way that you feel. Otherwise, we're going to just be like faking it till we make it if we keep it over here. So we have to do this and we have to go deeper and try to have some corrective emotional experiences in this relationship that we're going to have or with like some, you know, internal like chair work, like talking to a younger version of yourself. Like there's so much work that goes into body image. I think it's actually one of like the hardest things to work with in therapy. But if you're willing to like really stick with it and commit to shifting some of these things, I've seen that slow, almost like sneaky change happen. And I was talking to a client about this the other day. We were like really reflecting on her growth and the changes that she's made. And like, she kind of does like we just don't go there anymore. We just don't do that anymore. Like the thoughts will pop up and it's like, no, not today, not tomorrow. That's just not a thing we do anymore. And like, that's how she like shakes it off now, even when the thoughts or feelings do pop up for her. But that's years of work of figuring out where everything came from and working on that part of it and shifting all these other things in her life. And then constantly like the repetition of that work, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. I think it makes a lot of sense to me. And I think it kind of reminds me of even like that, the quote of like words have power, right? Like I think when you speak to like when you bring life to a thought, right? Like you say it out loud, you can kind of just begin to just manifest it more. I believe in that. Like you believe to kind of just make it more a part of your reality. Whereas if you have the thought and you try to just like reframe or shift it or, you know, just replace it with something that's a little bit more kind to yourself, you kind of suffocate that other thought, right? Like that thought can't, it diminishes, right? So like, you know, I think even with that too, like even just around like language, it makes me think of language too, like, and even something else around like just not commenting on like negatively about yourself, but even other people, right? Like when you make comments about how people look, right? Unsolicited, even if it's positive, right? Like sometimes I'm a little bit leery, like, you know, which it can seem weird because I think giving compliments and saying, oh, you look good, you look great, can sometimes like reinforce something that like you may not even know is there, right?
Totally.
And so I think, and that may have been something that like I even saw like in like doing my research too, like looking through, you know, your clips, something similar. You said something along those lines, is that like, you know, sometimes just like not commenting on someone's appearance is okay. Like you don't always have to, you know, give your feedback on how you think someone looks, unless like, I mean, if you're in like a, you know, like a intimate romantic relationship and you guys, you know, but the thing is,
you better be complimenting me on how I look. No, I'm just kidding.
Right. I want to know from my friends.
I would like to hear more.
Right. I want my friends, of course, people, my loved ones.
Right.
But sometimes unsolicited commentary on how someone looks, you don't know what they're dealing with or going through in that moment. So it may not even be, you can give someone a compliment and they don't feel or agree with you at all. So like it kind of just like, they may think you're lying to them. Like, oh, I look good. How could you say that? I woke up today and didn't see that. You get what I'm saying? So I sometimes am like, I'm more conscious of that now. Because I think me personally, I feel like I've grown up my entire life being commented on how I look, from whether it be from weight to like, you know, to hair to what, you know, as women, I think that naturally like that just is a thing that we deal with in society in general. But, you know, a lot of it even came from like people that love and care about me just saying like, oh girl, like work on this or do this. And it's just like, okay, I'll try.
Unsolicited advice, right? But you're so right, because it's that, I was actually talking about this in trauma group. We had a whole conversation about this last week, where it's, if you're so used to validation because everybody always makes some sort of comment, there's a little sneaky voice that's like, well, they didn't today. What does that mean? So you don't even have to be like struggling with anything with body image or weight or anything like that to also be affected by someone's comment or not commenting. And then if you are struggling, you just run a risk a little bit of reinforcing. So if someone is desperately in anorexia, for example, and you say you look like you lost weight, they are doing extreme things to maintain that weight. And that makes them feel like they have to keep doing that. Obviously, if you say the opposite, that's going to be damaging as well, because we're a fat phobic society. And that's a whole, we could have many more conversations about that. But I think noticing whether or not someone comments on your body or your hair or your outfit or anything could also be damaging, because at first I was going to be like, well, we can meet in the middle, like maybe you say like your hair looks so good today or something. If you're a super complimenting person, like I would just say stray away from the weight stuff at the very least,
for sure.
But it's so interesting to note, like if someone really seeks some parents' approval, and they always have, and their mom was always commenting on their outfit or their hair or their whatever, and then they don't that one day, they could be thinking to themselves, my mom thinks I look terrible. And she's not going to say it, but she thinks it because she didn't say something about my outfit or whatever. And it's like so interesting to think about even the smallest absence of something can sometimes cause harm if we're like used to getting it.
Absolutely. That's a gem right there. Hope you guys are listening. That was a whole gem. Yes. And Yeah, I think something else that I came across as we were, as me, as I was looking just through like some of the content that you've discussed is the types of hunger. Right. And I thought that was really interesting because I don't think I've ever heard about that before, like the concept or the idea of different types of hunger. So can you speak to that a little bit? What are the different types of hunger?
Totally. So we have, oh boy, now I'm going to mess it up.
Yeah, it's okay.
Physical, mental, emotional, practical. I'm pretty sure. Or emotional, not mental.
Yeah.
So physical, emotional, practical, and wait.
Physical,
what did I just say?
Practical and
emotional.
Yeah. There's 4, right?
Physical,
I think
mental.
it's 4.
There's definitely 4.
Physical, emotional, practical, and
taste. Maybe that one.
Maybe.
Like, okay. Yeah. I'll go into them as best as I can, but I'm not positive that that's correct.
Okay. That's okay.
But basically, there's so many different types of hunger. And usually when you have manipulated food or have pushed past your hunger and fullness cues so many times in disordered eating or in a full-blown ED, you become so disconnected from your hunger and fullness cues. So I would say like one of the first steps in like relearning your relationship with food is making sure you're like not distracted when you're eating, making sure you're paying attention to your hunger, making sure you're eating enough food for your body and enough different types of food and satiating foods, and then kind of reporting afterward like, how full am I now and how satisfied am I? And like kind of going through that like relearning process that we've damaged to the point of like really not knowing that at a certain point in our ED. So something that then I talk about with clients later on in recovery is that there's a lot of different types of hunger that are going to come up, and that's okay.
Right.
And we should normalize, like you might just want to eat a cookie. You might have no hunger. You want a cookie because you want a cookie right now.
Yeah.
Okay, totally fine. Go have a cookie.
Right.
It doesn't have to perfectly align with your hunger and fullness and satiation cues because that's not real life.
Yes.
So often if there's been a more controlled environment like an eating disorder treatment center that someone has been in, and then they have to go out into real life, it's like you could feel like you're failing if you aren't following your meal plan perfectly.
Right.
But there's practical hunger is a great example of practical hunger is like you're getting on an airplane and you're not going to be able to eat what you want or what you would typically eat for 6 hours.
Yes.
How do we be practical about eating when you're not hungry early in the morning, getting a few snacks, whatever you can? It might not be the most nutritious meal you're going to have in your whole life.
Yeah.
And making sure that you have a little variety, something, because you have to be practical in that situation.
Absolutely.
Physical is obviously, we know. And emotional eating, mental hunger, because it comes up because we're having an emotion that we maybe associate with comfort food, for example, like a breakup or even just a nostalgic moment. Maybe it reminds you of your childhood or something. And then all of a sudden you get hungry because you're having an emotion, and that's how you used to comfort yourself in the past. So even if it is aligned with an emotional behavior or a time in your life where you maybe were in your disordered eating patterns, you could still eat that thing, and it doesn't have to be a whole full-blown binge or something. You could be eating from an emotional place. You could not have been hungry before. You could feel overly full. And guess what? That's okay.
Yeah.
So I think I always bring up those types of hunger when I'm feeling like clients are being really, really hard on themselves, like post-recovery journey, or like throughout, maybe like they're a couple years in, or they've been intuitive eating for a while. They feel really good about their relationship food. And then they're like, I've just been self-sabotaging. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? Like, tell me a little bit more about that. And it's like, you just emotionally ate.
Right.
This is a totally normal thing to do. It's a totally healthy thing to do. It's a tool that was available to you that you used, and you felt better afterward. Yeah, maybe you felt a little worse because now the shame is coming up, but there's nothing to be ashamed about. It's just emotional eating. It's just utilizing one form of hunger, and it's a tool. Maybe it's not your favorite tool in your toolbox, and that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. I love that. I love the breakdown, and I think it makes a lot of sense. It's very like, it actually is pretty simple, I think, like a simple concept that I think people can hold on to. Like even people who may not deal with like eating disorder or ED. I'm sorry, I can't use this. You know what, TikTok?
No, it's fine. Just don't put it in the caption or on the screen. I think it'll be okay. Maybe we'll sneak past them.
Yes. Yeah. I think it's a simple concept, right? And I think because thinking about emotional eating, I'm like, that's been happening probably in my family for forever.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that anyone has an ED per se. But I also do not know that, that if that's a thing. But I know I've seen it. I've definitely seen it where it's like someone is in distress or sad, and then it's like, now we're eating cake and we're eating, and I'm like, okay.
And I still see it with myself. Like, I still emotionally eat. I still practically eat. I do not eat perfectly at my hunger and fullness cues at all times because I'm in recovery. Like, that's a fallacy.
For sure.
I don't know anyone who has the perfect ability to do that. Good for you. I take my recovery very seriously, of course, but I can be a little bit more flexible with it at this point in my recovery journey. It's so funny that we're talking about this because it came up at dinner last night.
Yeah.
And my friend's husband said, we were just like, we were noshing. We were having like so many different really yummy foods. And he was like, what would you have if you could have a cheap food for the rest of your life? And I was like, I haven't even heard that term in so long. I hope John doesn't hear this. Don't be upset. This is not offensive to me in any way, but it was just an interesting moment for me to reflect on my relationship with food.
Yeah.
Because I was like, there's nothing that I like don't let myself have. So like, there's nothing that I can think of that I'd be like, yes, that's the food that I want to eat unlimited amounts of for the rest of my life. Because I'm like, I eat really whatever I want now. And that was such a like interesting reflection for me because I was like, I can't even come up with an answer for this question.
Yeah.
But I like when you're in recovery for a while, it's kind of like letting yourself eat the food and not feeling shame about it is the biggest like theme. So even if you do eat emotionally or if you do not eat perfectly in recovery alignment and you miss a vegetable for a couple days or something like that, or, a fiber or whatever, or like you accidentally do skip a meal and then you get right back on the horse.
Yeah.
You're able to be like, okay, the shame is the worst part. I honestly say this in therapy all the time. The shame is more poisonous than anything else we put in our body.
For sure. Absolutely. No, thank you for this. Thank you.
Of course.
Yeah. And just a couple more, right?
Yeah,
a couple
you're
more
good.
Questions.
Can you tell that I could talk literally all day long?
No, like you are good at. First of all, you're good at like even your responses are like perfect because I think you give just like the right amount of like information and detail, and it's good.
Okay,
it's
thanks.
good. So yeah, and intuitive eating.
Yes.
What is intuitive eating?
Okay, intuitive eating is a concept. There's a book on it. I am forgetting the names of the authors, but they are great. And intuitive eating is basically like going away with diet culture, healing your relationship with food through tapping into your hunger and fullness cues. So it's basically a lot of what I've already kind of talked about and covered. And there's like all these different theories in there and like conceptualizations of like talking through like catching the food police when the food police come in, and basically like making sure that you're allowing yourself to have all foods and then relearning your relationship with food again. Yeah. But it's like doing away with any strict structure.
Okay.
And it's tapping into your intuition. My only problem with it is that a lot of people don't know how to tap into their intuition or don't know how to differentiate like the food police voice from their own capital S self voice, which I'm using a little bit of parts work here now too. But like the authentic self is often very hard to identify in an eating disorder. So kind of thinking about that as just a readiness level or utilizing the book and also really working on like finding your voice and finding who you are with a therapist so that you can kind of tap into that. Intuition is like, I talk about that with clients who don't have EDs. Like, what do I want? Who am I? Like, how do I listen to myself? Is it intuition or is it a trauma response? Like, I think there's so many things that are like kind of hard to suss out. Yeah. But if you start listening, you will hear them.
Absolutely. I love that. That makes a lot of sense. And I think, even like, just ED aside, right? I think regular people navigating life do not use their intuition. So I could imagine the difficulty when you're actually navigating or dealing with something that is difficult, right? Or challenging or hard for you, like just pattern wise, like you've just gotten used to operating in this way, kind of like tapping into something, you know, within, when people just have a hard time doing that in general. I think that, you know, the concept sounds amazing. And I think it sounds like it could be useful, but I guess it would just take a lot of just practice and work.
So much practice. And I have had clients use it and not go to formal treatment and like pull themselves out of eating disorders before coming to me. So like it is a proven method, I think it says in the book. Like it is great.
Yeah.
I just always I always worry about people like trying to do things on their own. Not because I want to infantilize anyone.
Yeah.
It's just with this kind of stuff, I feel like having an accountability partner and a therapist is so important.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. Well, thank you for that. And now we will, well, before switching gears, I just wanted to go into maybe some misconceptions, right? Some misconceptions about eating disorders, because I feel like there's a lot of just even stereotypical things that people may think, or you know, maybe even that just kind of circulates when it comes to eating disorders. What would you say are maybe like 2 to 3, or however many that come to mind, misconceptions about eating disorders or ED?
So we covered a couple.
Yes.
I feel like the cultural aspects of like who has an eating disorder, like what's the eating disorder look, what types of communities are affected by eating disorders, and like people and identities and all of that stuff. So I feel like that's for sure one, that it's like a white woman's disorder. Not true at all.
Right.
And the research on people with eating disorders is so limited, as most medical research is in our world. So yeah, that's out. That's not true. That you can tell by looking at someone also just like body type wise, which eating disorder they struggle with, or like that you can make an assumption about somebody based off of their size. I think too, like if you're in a smaller body, you are anorexic, and you're in a larger body, you must have binge eating disorder. Not the case at all.
Right.
Actually, could be completely swapped.
Yeah.
And people, I think, don't talk about that enough, or like give enough nuance to that. And then that it's all about the food. It's mostly not about the food.
Right.
It's mostly about a trauma response or control issues, or trying to seek some sort of emotional regulation, in my opinion. So I think people think that it's somewhat about vanity. Most people do not like themselves or like the way that they look, or are not even really satisfied at any points in their eating disorder with how they look. It's usually not about vanity. It's usually not about the food itself, or what they're actually seeing in the mirror, or how they're presenting themselves at the beach or on Instagram or whatever. It's usually something so much more emotionally focused and charged than that.
That's a good one. That's a really good one, because I feel like if I'm like growing up, I feel like, you know, that's what I always heard it to be, right? That like it had, and this, of course, stereotypical things, right? Like, oh, like this person, you know, wants to be really, you know, thin, right? They think that, you know, like them being thinner looks better, right? And this was something that forever, it wasn't until, of course, I got in the field and did more research, and that I understand that now. But I'm sure there's so many people walking around thinking that, which is why we're here.
And we got to blast it out to tell people more about it, because it's like, just eat a cheeseburger. My least favorite comment that anyone can ever make. It's like, it's so not about that.
Right.
They can get the food and the nourishment down. It's like, but after that, there's still so much to unpack and explore, and people can recover. I think that's why people recover and then have multiple tries in a treatment center, or like are struggling for so long, because you could kind of slap a Band-Aid on it and say you need to be weight restored, whatever that means again, or, you know, to be like safe. And it's like, okay, well, the safety is just one piece of this puzzle.
Right.
There's so much that has to happen in addition to somebody being stabilized. And I'm using quotes because it's like, that's, again, the BMI thing is like not really a thing.
Throw that away.
And throw it away.
Yeah.
But I think that there's still a misconception that that's the way. I think, yes, we have to nourish our bodies to be able to even like receive some of the therapy work. And that's usually what I tell clients if they need more support with a dietitian or someone else. I'm like, we could do this anxiety work all day long, but if you're not eating, it's not going to permeate. It's not going to stick. It's not going to stay and help you make the changes that you want to make because you're not nourishing your body, and your body needs that to do this.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that if anything, that's the part of it that always like, I'm always curious about. Cause I know for me, if I don't eat like for like an extended period of time, I am a different person.
I'm a toddler. I am so emotionally short fused. I am so irritable.
Yeah.
I'm a toddler. And I cannot show up in spaces like that. Like, especially as a professional presence now, I'm like, girl, you got to get it together.
Yeah.
Because you are not nice.
Yeah. Same.
And it's like, we really don't think about that. And again, this is where I almost look at my brain and I'm like, this is a different brain. So I'm like, how are you functioning?
Yeah.
How are you walking about the world with this attitude?
Right.
Because now it's like, oh my God, it's been too long. Like, I need a snack. I need to regulate like immediately. And I know that's my go-to now.
Absolutely. And I think I even just noticed like how like I perk up, or I even like where I'm even able to like just like think about things in a clearer way as opposed to when I'm like, when I am hungry, I can't even think. Like you ask me like what time it is and I'm like, look at your own.
How dare you? Like, it's like the little things are so much more tolerable when you're nourished and you've got good sleep.
Yes.
Sleep is so slept on. Like drinking water, like all of these like really like back to basics things that we end up talking about in therapy because I'm like, well, did you drink any water today? Are you over caffeinated? Did you eat? Yeah, obviously your mental health is poor, but I could say the same thing about myself at certain points in my life. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yes. And I just wanted to check on time. We're doing okay, right? For time?
If we could like round off in 5 minutes, that'd be great.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you. Yeah. And we had a couple more. I'm like, maybe if we could do a part 2 maybe in the future.
Yeah.
Yes, because there's so many other things. Like, of course, I want to get into. You're also a relational therapist, so you talk a lot about relationship stuff as well. So you know what? Maybe I'll end off with like one of those questions that I had. One or two, right? Well, the first one being is, what do you find is the common theme that you encounter when it comes to relationships, being a relationship therapist and helping clients through relationship issues?
The most common themes are people feeling like they don't deserve love and care and support, I think, really underneath the surface. I feel like when people struggle in dating and relationships and they say, I really want to find somebody, and then there's all these barriers that pop up, we usually kindly, gently end up unpacking like, there's something here with you that might actually be pausing or stopping you from letting somebody else fully in. So this vulnerability aversion, I think, is a huge theme that I've seen throughout all different ages, all different types of people that have come to therapy with me throughout the years.
Yes.
It's this underlying suspicion, I think, that they are not lovable, that then they're wanting to be loved, and then it's like those two are fighting. And the part that is like, I don't think I deserve love, wants to protect them, and then ends up putting up walls or doing protest behaviors or kind of, I hate the word self-sabotaging because I do think it's very protective.
Yeah.
But like being like, listen, like I don't actually think we deserve this. I'm going to try to protect you from the rejection, and that will feel really bad if you're found out to be such a bad person or so unlovable. So this other part that's like, no, I think I do deserve love, gets squashed by the protective part that's like, no, we have to stay in safety.
Yeah.
People can't find out that we're so terrible and unlovable. And like, that's what we have to then work on, is like convincing that part and that like kind of integration of like, no, you are absolutely worthy of love.
Yeah.
Who made you believe you aren't? How did this come to be? And how can we talk through that and process that and correct that?
Yeah. I love that. It's deep.
Huge theme though. I'm men, women, anybody that I've seen has struggled with like some degree of that, I feel.
Right. Feeling deserving.
Yeah.
Got it.
And just being vulnerable, being
sure.
seen.
Thank you.
Scary.
Yeah, it is. It is scary. And I could see that completely. I could see how that could be a theme. And I feel like I've experienced similar, where it's like maybe they tell themselves that they feel deserving of this, but their actions show different. That maybe they don't. You if you felt like you deserved this thing, then you would show up differently.
And that's my favorite, is the challenging that can happen as a relational therapist, because it's really about the relationship between the therapist and the client, right?
Yes.
So the challenging of like, you keep saying you love yourself. I want to believe you,
Mm-hmm.
but what's going on over here?
Mm-hmm.
Because this does not sound like a person who loves themselves.
Yeah.
So where's the disconnect, or what's the part of you that doesn't?
Mm-hmm.
I need to hear from that here in therapy today, because that's going to be where we find stuff out. The part of you that says you love yourself and wants to believe you love yourself, that's fine. Keep her for later. But like, give me more of like this other part that I'm noticing.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Ooh, that's so good. Oh my gosh.
Thanks.
Okay. You know what? I think that was the last one.
Okay.
This was so good. I feel like there was
gosh.
the you know what? Maybe I'm gonna just sneak this last one in here before we end.
Okay.
Which was, it was like a hot take that I know that I saw you you talked about on your in your content, which is unconditional love in relationships, right? And that being unhealthy. Can you just speak to that? And that'll be the last one before we end.
This one was controversial.
Yeah.
I kind of was just saying that all relationships should have conditions.
Mm-hmm.
Not that you can't experience what I think we think of when we think of unconditional love. Like, of course, everyone wants to be loved fully and deeply and should be able to give that fully and deeply.
Mm-hmm.
But I was just saying, like, there should be a condition on, well, if you disrespect me,
Mm-hmm.
I will not allow you to do XYZ, 1, 2, 3.
Yes.
So it's like the love that goes so deep, but also having boundaries with it, or also having agreements.
Mhm.
And I think in relationships and couples therapy, like thinking through your agreements can change. They don't have to stay set in stone forever.
Yeah.
But like, we should all have agreements between parties that we're like allowing to see us intimately and vulnerably. Like, no one should be able to say, you owe me unconditional love
Mhm.
no matter what I do.
Right.
That's kind of like, I think parent to child maybe, but even at a certain point with parent to child, like if your kid grows up and is totally horrifying to you and treating you terribly, there can still be conditions here.
Yeah.
So I love the idea of unconditional love. And I think what we could replace it with is like loving somebody fully, deeply, seeing them, hearing them, understanding them.
Yes.
I think everybody deserves that.
Mhm.
And I think we should just all have like some boundaries with it.
Yes.
Not boundaries in the like hot, you know, it's
Mhm.
like the buzzword these days, like real boundaries.
Yeah.
Like boundaries that have conversation around them and communication and
Mhm.
like not the black and white kind of extreme.
Yes, absolutely. And I agree with you 100%. So controversial or
Or not.
I'm Team Lauren for what she said, okay?
I'm Team Mo. So hard. This was so much fun. Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Of course. Thank you for joining me. And any like final, anything you want to let the audience know, like anything you have coming up, anything they should look out for, and like where they can follow you and add your
Yeah,
everything.
I would love it if you could follow me at LEL Therapy on Instagram or TikTok or wherever. And I have a recovery workbook
Mhm.
that I'm finishing up painstakingly, procrastinatingly.
Mhm.
It won't come out till next summer, but if you follow me, I will probably be incessantly plugging it. And the
Yeah.
whole idea is just ongoing, tune in to your body, check
Yes.
in with yourself. A little workbook that you can pick up if you need like a 6-week
Yeah.
reset. Because I know there's been times for me where I'm like, I probably could use like some of those old exercises that
Yeah.
I was doing in eating disorder treatment. So it's kind of like combining some of those relational questions that I mentioned here, like those deeper journal prompts,
Yeah.
and then some activities.
Love it.
So
Yes.
yeah, that'll be out next summer, but please look out for it.
Look out for the
because
book.
I'm working really hard on it.
Yes, yes. No, thank you so much. Make sure you guys follow Lauren. And thank you guys so much for tuning in. It's another episode, your Mental
Yeah.
Matters podcast.
Thank you guys.
Yay.
Yay. Thank you so
No,
much.
of course, thank you.
That was so